And we are live. I'd like to welcome everybody to our second installment of Mannimal Research. And I'm joined tonight, as always, by the lovely and talented Mr. Ricky Weaver. How's it going tonight, Ricky?
Oh, it's going great, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Excited about tonight's show. We
Oh, yeah.
have Mr. Rick Taylor coming on. He's an author. He's going to come on and talk about his book and a little bit of about the experiences that he's had. And he's been doing this for about 15 years. He is retired law enforcement, actually. So that goes to add to what I talked about on the last show about the people that are actually seeing these things aren't, what they were labeled as at one time, the hillbillies and the people up in the backwoods and the mountain people. It's not them anymore. It's credible people that are seeing this. And Mr. Rick Taylor is a very good example of that. He's a smart guy, very well spoken. Um, has some really cool experiences, and I've got some pictures that I'm going to be showing tonight, and we're going to show you his book. And you guys, do me a favor, do all of us a favor, get order his book. It's on Amazon. We're going to put a picture of it up there. I don't think that I have the link to it. Should have been better prepared, but I don't. But I'll show it at the bottom. The name of his book. In fact, let's go ahead and get that up there. Yeah, there he is. Guys, do us all a favor. Go out there and get that book. This guy knows what he's talking about. I can promise you that. Ricky, what's been going on with you, buddy? You been out any?
No, not this week. I haven't. I've been doing a lot of research on the internet. I'm still into digging around about the Appalachian Trail. I've actually decided to do a book on the Appalachian Trail and the encounters that people have been having on, excuse me, on the trail itself. And I've actually spoken with a lot of people this past week, and it's very interesting the encounters that has happened on the Appalachian Trail, not only here in Georgia but all the way into Maine.
Yeah, wow, good deal. Um, yeah, we had a an expedition plan this past weekend, and really hate that it fell through. Hope everybody is okay out there. We had some bad weather come down through the south down here, particularly in Tennessee. We had some tornadoes touch down, and that made us postpone our trip. But we are planning to get back out there this next weekend and next Saturday, and hopefully the next show we do, we'll have a little bit to share. Well, Ricky, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and jump in with Mr. Rick Taylor, if you don't mind, sir.
No, bring Rick right on.
There he is, Mr. Rick Taylor. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing fine, Wayne. Doing fine.
Good deal, good deal. We talked you up a little bit and trying to encourage everybody to go out and get your book. I'm gonna be showing it here in just a second, but if you don't mind, sir, just give us a little brief history of you and what did you have you always believed in Bigfoot? What made you believe in Bigfoot? And just your early encounters, if you don't mind, sir.
Certainly. First of all, thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure. I enjoy talking about this. I know there's a lot of people out there looking for answers. And if I could add, we had this earlier, and some people may experience some artifact. I don't know where all that static's coming through, but just want to let the folks know that it's not us, and there's been some problems with audio. I don't know if somebody's messing with this system or what, but
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
yes. So um, I at a young age saw the Patterson-Gimlin film for the first time when it was released, and like everybody else, it was shocking. I looked at the film even back then, Wayne and Ricky. It looked very real to me. I remember as a young adolescent, the hairs standing up on the back of my neck, watching Patty turn back, and do that famous look, and then head off into the woods. I was interested for a time, as anybody would be, but other youthful adventures and coming into junior high and high school girls and everything else distracted me, and I pretty much kind of forgot about it. But for many decades, I hunted, fished, and camped. By the way, I don't say this proudly. My family's from Oklahoma and Arkansas, but I was raised on the West Coast. After college, I moved to Texas and never looked back. But I had hunted, camped, fished, all my life into adulthood for several decades. And I didn't think the thing existed. My opinion was if it was out there, I would see it. Now, looking back, I can cite instances, knowing what I know now, that were possibly the big guys. But at the time, it was so subtle, it was not profound, and I easily overlooked it like many people do. I didn't have a chance encounter unexpectedly bumping into one. And I'm pretty thankful I didn't, because that would have been, well, people have nightmares over that kind of stuff, Wayne. There's some people won't even go back in the woods from it. But fast forward, it was here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, probably no more than 25 or 30 miles from downtown. It was a remote river bottom area, but it wasn't like the Pacific Northwest or remote southeastern Oklahoma. But my son and I were out there fishing on a heavily wooded creek. We had catfish, stink bait on the bottom with some poles. In Texas, you can fish with multiple poles. Some states you can't. We had minnows under a cork with another pole, and we were throwing lures, and basically anything that come through, we were offering them something. And we had a few nibbles, bites, a couple of throwbacks here and there. We weren't knocking it out, but enough to keep two hardcore fishermen busy. And we had got out there about 8 that night. It was well after midnight when I became aware, on our side of the creek, about 200 yards to my right, which would have been the north side of us, I began to hear occasional movement sounds, maybe a brush of leaves, something moving towards us, because I noticed the sounds at quite a distance. And then I started noticing several minutes later, they were a little bit closer. And to our right was a side slough that ran perpendicular into the creek, basically made a point. I had my pickup truck backed up close to that point, put a Coleman lantern on the tailgate, and we were out there in 2 folding chairs. It wasn't real bright, but if we needed to bait our hook, we had cap lights, to bait the hook and do the stuff. Once we threw our line out, we shut those off, and the Coleman lantern was the only, constant light source. Well, I want to say 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, somewhere in there, I started getting a very distinct feeling of being watched. And my grandmother was full-blood Cherokee Indian. I'm a mixed-blood tribal member of the Cherokee Nation. I don't know if it's the Native American bloodline, but I'm very good at feeling people watching me. I've astounded some people before trying to creep up on me, and they asked, "How did you know?" I said, "I felt you." That's all I can say. It was a very profound feeling of being watched. I wasn't nervous, but I was concerned. I started looking around casually with my son there, making sure somebody wasn't sneaking up to do bad or wrong. Coming from law enforcement, I know bad things happen to good people. And I looked around casually, checked behind the truck, to our right, left, and was reasonably satisfied nobody was creeping up on us. But then I heard the distinct very distinct sound of a pretty good sized branch being stepped on, and it snapped from the weight. And if you've ever heard anything, if a person lifts a branch and snaps it, the audio is different than that muffled near the ground pop. It's just real distinctive. Well, Wayne, armadillos, coyotes, four-legged animals that I know of don't do that. They don't crush and snap something. They're pretty light. Armadillos are noisy, but they're not breaking, big limbs or big branches. So that got my level of alertness up a couple notches. And I put the pole down. I went over to my truck and got a Q-beam spotlight out. And across that little side slough, I began to spot the brush line over there. Just curious, wondering if there was anything over there. And I guess I made one pass and was headed back the other direction, not expecting to see anything. And it wasn't sticking out of the brush, but that bright light, penetrates past the gaps, and spaces in the leaves and illuminates further back in the brush. And at one point, a facial shape passed through the circle of light as I'm moving it. I wasn't expecting to see it. And when I did and finally keyed on it in my mind, I'd already passed that point. So I snapped the light back into that area, trying to see what I just saw. Now, having said that, Wayne, it wasn't an animal. It was a facial shape, human-like. And that's what really surprised me more. But then I couldn't find it. I went kind of back and forth and around. Well, my son saw my more urgent or quick movements out of the corner of his eye, and he goes, "Dad, what are you doing?" And he was 15 at the time. And I didn't want to spook him. It was pretty dark around there. We're out there by ourselves. It was open land. We weren't trespassing. We didn't have to worry about doing anything wrong. But I didn't want to concern him too much. I just said, I'm just looking. Now, having said that, I was somewhat concerned and wanting to know who or what was over there. But I put the light up and I went back to the folding chair to continue fishing. But I'm listening, up to my right. And I want to say 5 minutes later, not more than 10, more movement caught my ear. And as I turned, in that dim Coleman light, an object arced out of that brush line towards us. It hit the water probably no more than 5 feet from us. We were a couple feet back from the edge of the water. And when it hit the water, it wasn't like a baseball or a grapefruit or, a golf ball. It was like a cinder block hit that water. It was a poof whoosh, and I mean, like a 50-pound child doing a cannonball off the high dive. And both my son and I just instinctively jumped back and kind of fell backwards in the folding chair, getting splattered by huge drops of water. Well, I was on my feet in an instant. And of course, he ran over and hugged me tight, yelling, "What was that? What?" And I'm pulling him back, watching these big waves fan out. And the only thing that went through my mind is that whatever it hit, it didn't float. It wasn't a beaver popping his tail. I've done top water, nothing come out of the water. I said, object came over and looped in and hit the water and scared the crap out of both of us, And I'm pulling him back, feeling quite threatened at this point. I had a little 380, automatic stuck in my fishing shirt pocket. I raced over to the truck and got my 357. I said, "Man, I felt threatened, Wayne." And I'm looking all the time to see if anything big comes over. I was going to dodge it, and not get hit. And I got the gun out, and I'm mad at this point because we weren't bothering anybody, Wayne. We're out there by ourselves, minding our own business, and I perceived somebody seriously messing with us. And I yelled across that brush line. I said, "That's not funny. You can hurt somebody throwing stuff like that. I have a gun, and if you throw anything else over here, I just may fire back." And my mind's reeling as to what's the deal here. And I was mad. So they were messing with us. I messed back with them. I aimed the gun safely into the mud beside me, right by my foot. plugged one ear, and turned my head away, cocked that back single action, and I blew a round off straight down into the mud. There's a loud boom. And immediately back over there on the other side in that brush line, I'm going to say it was 100 feet away from us when we were sitting in the chairs. I was probably 50 feet closer now. It sounded like a baby. Okay, somebody's. I'm hearing that anyway.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Somebody. Well, I was just hearing some back noise. Somebody's probably. I don't know. But anyway, it sounded like a baby bulldozer, or if you're a hunter jumping a big elk or buck deer in thick brush, that thing took off plowing through that thick foliage and didn't even slow down. I mean, you could hear limbs breaking, and it just plowed away from us at a pretty high rate of speed. If I'd have tried to get through that stuff, I'd have had to crawl, dip, scrunch. In Texas, you can't run through thick brush. Not for very far.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing never slowed down for a couple hundred yards till it faded out of hearing. And I just stood there with my jaw dropped open, and I kind of looked over at my son. He looked over at me and he goes, "Dad, what was that?" And I said, "I don't know, son, but let's go." So that was my, first, what in the world was that moment that I knew after pondering. I went out there the next day, and I still remotely thought someone, some human was messing with us, till I recalled the size the object was, and then got a good, clear, in the day view. At the very closest, it had to have come from 100 feet away. I don't know a NFL quarterback or Olympian that could chunk a cinder block 100 feet. Mm-hmm. No way possible. And so, I asked people questions, and told people, and they give you that, nodding your head, and in the end they shrug their shoulders and say, "Man, I don't know." That's an interesting story. So it kind of went stale and dormant for a year or two. And I happened to be on the internet, I want to say around 2005, 2004, somewhere in there, the mid 2000s. And I ran across a thread that said fishermen attacked at night while fishing. Whoa. So I clicked on it. It took me to the BFRO website. And I read the story in detail. Now there were 3 fishermen, and there was some details different, but it was a close template to what happened to me. And I got to thinking, Bigfoot, 30 miles from downtown Dallas, nah. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to, I even approached a couple groups, and that was the first thing they told me. They said, "No, it's too close," and dismissed it. But I eventually submitted a sighting report to the BFRO. Didn't think it was going to ever go anywhere. Got a reply back in about a week. I talked with an investigator there with BFRO. At that point in time, while I was talking to him, I could hear radio traffic in the background, and I asked him point blank. I said, "Are you law enforcement?" I mean, I could tell by the chatter, the jargon. He said, "Well, yes." He said, I'm in, dispatch room in the back, talking. He wasn't neglecting his duties, but he was close to the dispatch boards and stuff. Yeah, but he was active law enforcement, and we talked a lot. Now, what he related to me and the BFRO, those stories you see published are probably only 20% of the information that they receive. If they can't hit certain verifying details, it's never published. But he said, "Yeah, I'm aware of several other reports coming from that waterway, not right at my exact location, but nearby." And I go, "You're kidding me." It was shocking to me. Well, long story short, I met him out there later. At first, me and another guy did some research in the area where I had the object tossed at us. We were paralleled. We were followed by something. Had some limbs snap. Probably the most surprising thing, and I didn't know much about it then, but I read about all of it later, is we reached a point where we had seen this tree pushed over a small waterway, obviously a makeshift bridge. And we reached a point back there, Wayne, where it was like somebody turned a switch on to nice open air to, it smelled to me like something dead, sewer water, and a wet dog, all kind of mixed into one. Very, very pungent and repulsive. And we kind of backed out. And at some point, that smell left as quickly as it. I'd never had anything like that happen to me. I'd never smelled anything like that. But over time, we switched our area of research to another area and met that BFRO official out there. And under his guidance, I had my first visual sighting in this area at about 75 yards with binoculars. And I was talking to another researcher when I happened to find this in the binoculars. I was looking over his shoulder, and what caught my eye was this subject was hiding in some pretty thick brush, watching us, but he had a sweaty brow or forehead, and it was morning. And the first thing that caught my eye in the binoculars was that glint of light, and it was far past any dew. I mean, it was late morning when any dew on the leaves would have evaporated, and that twinkle caught my eye. So I focused in, and I'm looking at this bush and trying to figure out what was wet there. And then over a period of time, and I didn't send that sketch I made of it, but I focused in, and then I saw the forehead, and I saw two eyes looking right at me. And man, I told him, there's one, I see it right there. And of course, he's swiveling around saying, where? And I'm trying to, describe it and move closer. Have you ever tried walking in the woods looking through binoculars? It don't work very well.
No, that gets kind of rough.
Yes. I caught a stump or a log, and I had to do some quick, movements to keep from doing a face plant. I almost face planted. By the time I recovered, got back upright, and put the binoculars back over there, the bush was swaying and the subject was gone. He knew I saw him, and he fled. One of the other go ahead.
I'm sorry. You actually sent me some pretty good pictures, and I've got them here. And what I'd like to do is I'll put one up, and if you would just
Sure.
give us a little bit of a backstory behind it. Is that all right?
Absolutely. Okay, this is near Lake Eufaula in central Oklahoma. Lake Eufaula is super huge. This was later in my experiences. I was attending a excuse me, a Native American gathering there on a landowner's property. I didn't go up there to make it was a drum making workshop, and I didn't go up there to make drums, but I'd been told that these subjects lived around her land, and I wanted to get up there and get a real close look at one. I spent 2 days while the drum making workshop was going on, lurking about in the woods both day and night with night vision, with cameras. Now, Wayne, at that time, and Ricky, I thought these things were nothing but a dumb, undiscovered primate, a big monkey running around out in the woods and just hadn't been discovered yet. And of course, some of the stories that landowner told me sounded pretty incredible, but I spent 2 days, and I've got a video, night vision video I took that I caught some dialogue in the brush. I can send that to you later. There's a lot, I hadn't shared, but I spent 2 days trying to see these subjects, to trick them. And it's been my experience, Wayne, you can't trick these subjects. The best way, you got to meet them head on, acknowledge them, and talk to them. And if you're if you're doing anything furtive, trying to bait, drive like livestock or lure them in and trick them, I've spun my wheels. That doesn't work. I would rather them approach me on their own accord, which I've had very successful doing that. I respect them. I don't worship them or anything like that, but I respect their home, their land, and it's very important. But that picture was on a meeting I had where a family group of 5 approached me. Now, to set this up, and the whole story would take more than an hour. I reached a point of frustration. I was out in the woods. I felt like I was being watched, and I quit the lurking around and trying to trick them. And I just started talking out loud. And I said, look, I'm not here to hurt you. All I want to do is get a good, close look, up close, not 75 yards through a binocular. I want to see you right up close. And while I was talking, one of these Choctaw, mixed Choctaw blood man, come down the trail. And we had walkie-talkies. I wasn't out there by myself per se. I had radio communication. And he came up to my parked truck. I was sitting on the tailgate. It was dark. And he said, Rick, he said, were you aware that there was something off to your right behind the tree line there? He said, I saw it moving away. It was twilight. It wasn't pitch dark yet. And I said, well, I kind of thought I was being watched. He said, yeah, there was one right there. So I was reasonably certain that my words had been heard, where I just got frustrated and I said, I want to see you. Fast forward to the next night, the Native American drum making culminated in a fireside service with a lot of ceremonial and religious things going on. And I left it early. I went back out into the woods, and Wayne, I didn't want to be pranked with. I would go in. This lady had about 40 acres of clear-cut land surrounded by thick Oklahoma woods. If I went off into the woods, I would always double around and come back and go to a different area, in just in case somebody was going to try to prank with me. Now, I didn't have the time or desire to be tricked or messed with, so
Yeah.
I took pretty reasonable precautions that in order to follow me, they, number one, would have had to have had good night vision, and they would have had to have kept me in view. So I was in a pretty good hiding place where if these subjects wanted to come out of the tree line and observe the fireside service, I was in a good flanking position to observe them. And I'm out there, set up, watching things with, it was a Gen 1 scope. I've also got a FLIR thermal. I may get a Gen 3. Well, I've got a friend that's got one. But anyway, decent night vision. If they came out of the tree line, I would have seen them. And at some point, something comes out of the brush down there. And oh, man, and I got the video running. And it starts coming towards me, and then I realize it's the landowner. I never saw her leave the fireside service, but she was coming out of that area I was watching. And instead of cutting diagonally across back to the fireside service, she's headed straight for me, my direction. And I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty, I'm not out there. And plus, to see me, Wayne, you'd have had to known I was in the brush back there and have night vision. And she walked through the brush there and walked right up to me. And of course, wow. I stood up and called her by name. I said, how did you know I was here? Now, Wayne, she looked at me and she said, they told me you were here. Okay. That was the first curveball. I mean, that had me thinking, okay, you guys are pretty good, because I was still skeptical. And the next thing she told me just blew me away. She said, do you want to go see them? Now, what are the chances? Different area the night before, I said that, reasonably certain nobody was there, at least nobody I knew. And then the next night, she finds me in a hiding area and asked, or at least asked the question in answer to what I said the night before. Is it impossible it was chance? No. But, the likelihood of that's like getting hit by a comet. I mean, I was in my head real quick. And I said, yeah, sure. I'd like to go see him. So we went back to the fireside service briefly. She told the people that she was taking me to one of her special meeting areas and for everybody to stay here. She didn't often take people there. It was kind of a guarded area. And it took us a while. We got back up to the north side of her 40 acres and stopped at a gate. She stopped and started calling various names. And I'm leaning against this cattle fence. The clear cut went about 10 yards past the fence line, and then it was thick brush. So you had, about a 10-foot wide area beyond the wooden fence. But I started hearing crunching, crackling, snapping. Whatever it was sounded big coming up out of the creek bottom that was a couple hundred yards, further east of us. We were facing east. And it was coming straight towards us. It sounded very real. And I'm looking through the dark brush to give you a background. It was about a 2/3 moon in the open area. I had no problem seeing, but you get under that thick canopy, it was dark, almost pitch dark. And then I started hearing more noise quartering off to the northeast and more noise quartering off to at least 3 different groups, and it sounded like multiple footsteps. And I'm still skeptical here, and I'm thinking, man, these people are really, going out of their way. But how are they sounding so big? I mean, it sounded big at the closer they got. And I don't mind telling you, by the time it came up to, I estimate, about 20 feet from us, about 10 feet into the thick brush, and came to a stop, whatever was out there sounded very big and very real. It did not sound like people, and I didn't see any flashlight, glints or any leakage of anybody using flashlights out there. And to walk through that stuff at night in Oklahoma in the pitch dark, that's not my, I wouldn't do it. With all the stuff that's in the woods, especially close to that creek with water moccasins and snakes and everything, it just wouldn't have been worth it. And so sounded very real, quite nervous. I asked her, she had told me 2 things. They don't like cameras, they don't like lights, or anything you put up to your face. Okay. She said, do not use a flashlight or a camera without asking me. I said, okay. Or my night vision. Well, at that point, I was pretty nervous because whatever sounded, across that into that brush sounded pretty real. And I tried to crank up my night vision. Now, I don't go into kind of the off-the-wall paranormal stuff, but I will share this with you. I've experienced some things I don't freely share often, and that's a whole other subject. I could go there, and I'm not. Just having people believe these exist is really hard for some people. But this night vision scope was new, and I'd had no problems with it. When I switched it on, Wayne, it didn't work. It wouldn't energize. I'm looking at it because I'd asked her. I said, "Can I use the night vision?" She said, "Yeah, go ahead." And it didn't work. So I'm clicking on and off, and I look over at her, and I said, "I don't understand this. It was just working." I said, "It doesn't work." And she just paused a minute, and then she said, "Try it now." And it clicks right on. Well, I don't mind telling you what ran through my mind. Is this woman a witch or what? I mean, right then I knew no pranksters could mess with my night vision. I mean, that there was no way that I knew of possible. Well, I looked, and night vision isn't an X-ray machine. It wouldn't penetrate the thick brush. I couldn't see anything but leaves. And pretty quickly I said, well, I can't see anything. I put the night, turned it off, put it back up in the holster I had. And At that point, she goes, "Do you want to go in and see them?" Now, I was so nervous, Wayne and Ricky. If she was a dude, a man, uh, that sounded too real, and I was feeling pretty nervous. I'd have probably begged off and said, "Okay, I'm okay. That's all right." But I couldn't wimp out. My testosterone pride wouldn't let me wimp out in front of a woman. I'm sorry, she wasn't scared. I was. And if she'd have been a man, I'd have probably not. So I said a feeble yeah. I mean, it sounded real, and I didn't know what was over there. And I don't do vulnerable very well, okay? And to step in there, with big stuff moving around, that was pretty vulnerable. So we went through the gate. We walked back about 50 or 100 yards, and there was a parting in the thick brush. There was a trail there. She turned into it. I followed her. I could see her real well, but when we turned in and got under that thick canopy and the brush was anywhere from waist to almost shoulder high, I could hardly see her. And man, I crowded up on her 6 o'clock, man. I mean, close, because I didn't want to, miss her. I wanted to be right with her. She was their friend. And there was stuff moving around on both sides of the brush. I could hear it very close. I don't know if it was being parallel. They were following us or moving. There was a lot of movement around, and I was afraid to turn my head and look. All I was watching was the back of her head, expecting something to reach out and grab me at any moment. I mean, I was way out of my comfort zone, bro. And we got back in there maybe another 100 yards and then made a left. And we came to her meeting area back there. And that area had the trees missing, and that 2/3 moon kind of illuminated a little circular area in there. And man, there was stuff moving around all over. And I asked her, well, here's another you won't believe it, but it's in my book, so I'll go ahead and say it. Back in there, standing there, hearing all this stuff moving around, the very clear and distinct words passed through my mind. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't expecting this to happen, but it was very clear and articulate, and it was asking me, "Why are you carrying a gun?" Okay. Now, Wayne and Ricky, I'm retired law enforcement. I probably carry a large bore handgun like a set of keys, legal. I'm one of the good guys. But nobody up there in that gathering knew I was armed. They didn't know it. And here these words in my head were asking me, "Why are you carrying a gun?" And in my thoughts, I'm thinking, "Rick, you're losing it." And I didn't know what to do with that. And the emphasis, the strength, the clarity multiplied about 10 times in my head. Now, having said that, Wayne and Ricky, I believe we as people, more when we were in tribal gatherings and we're out in the woods, I think we had abilities of communication that we've lost. Laboratories have documented mental telepathy between twins, people having intuitions and hunches and stuff. There's a whole lot going on, in the field that we don't understand. But that second time those words went through my head, I immediately knew that those subjects were talking to me. I knew it came from them. Now, I don't know how to explain how I knew to answer, but this is probably one of those primal skills that was stirred, but I did answer them in my head very clearly. I said, "It is a tool of protection that I've carried on my job. I've carried it around my close friends and family. I've never hurt them with it, and I will not hurt you now." And then right after that statement in my head, the word said, "Step away from," and they named the landowner by name. And I looked over at her and I said, they're telling me to move away from you. She didn't act shocked. She just kind of smiled and said, do what they tell you to do. And to move away from my security blanket, I was right next to her, okay, with all of this big stuff. I don't know who that type of thing. It's probably one of the hardest things I did, but I turned back. I went back down the trail that we had come to. I got to the intersection, the T intersection. I looked to my right, the direction we had come in, and I looked to my left. And when I turned and looked to my left, I don't know if you've ever seen those Bigfoot size comparison charts where it shows a normal size man and then it shows how tall the Bigfoot is, and they got the Bigfoot drawn, looming. This stuff looked just like that drawing at about 50 feet down the trail going deeper into the woods. He stepped out from behind a tree. Every bit, we measured it later. He was a 10-footer. He was a big 10-foot alpha male. And he was looking right down the trail at me. And the way it worked is he stepped into another break. They were using it like spotlights, like Ed Sullivan used to do years ago, stepping out from behind the curtain and a spotlight would be on him. Gaps in the trees. He stepped into that 2/3 moonlight. I could see him very clearly. And he was doing this. He was swaying from side to side, wasn't making any noise, but he was just looking at me swaying from side to side. And the landowner asked me, she said, Rick, do you see him? I said, yeah, he's down the trail right there. She goes, sway with him. I don't know the significance of that, but I started doing this side to side sway, watching the big alpha male. And at that point, off to my right, in that probably chest high brush, I heard crackling and I looked over in another spot of moonlight. This male, I put him at a juvenile because I'm 6 foot tall, and he was basically looking at each other. And I see him come up, and the first thing he does when he looks at me is his jaw drops, and he goes. You could tell he was as astonished getting a good close look at me as I would. We gawked at each other for a second, and then he would turn back to that big alpha male, and then back again with his mouth open, just as astonished as me. And then on the trail in front of me to my left, she was obviously female, I could tell. Quite, she wasn't wearing a bra or clothing. She stepped out, and about the same height as him. And at that point, Wayne, being a parent and a grandparent, I realized that the big alpha male was letting younger ones get close to me for a good look, letting me see them and look back. As a parent, when it dawned on me, they were trusting me enough to let their young up close. All of my fear vanished. I laughing, and man, this was cool. Behind that female was another, I want to say 8-footer. I couldn't get a good look at them, but I'm assuming that was mother. She wasn't as big as the alpha male, but much taller than the other two. And I just was, they never made an utterance. They didn't close in close. I never felt threatened. They were giving me a good close look at them. Now, the thing that happened next, I don't know, I don't care if people, believe me or not. I've told this story. It's been documented. I couldn't see real clearly because of that waist to chest high brush, and the moon, of course, was off kind of angled. But in that dark trail in front of that young female, I saw movement, and I'm kind of looking down, and every now and then I could catch a little head bobbing around, and it was a little toddler in front of that young female. And I couldn't get a real clear look at it other than its head. The lower body was kind of occluded by the brush, but it was just kind of, walking around in front of the female. And then all of a sudden I'm looking down and I see its little head tilt back, and it notices me. And at that point, it makes a bolt towards me, just like a little toddler. Got both of its arms up, running, not running, but scurrying towards me. Wayne, I'm gonna tell you, it's very intense to have these things close, but the thought of a little hairy one latching on to me, I couldn't have taken. I'd have probably stroked out right there, and I mean, I've been gone. And fortunately, that young female lunged forward, got the little toddler. It got within about 2 or 3 feet of me, and all I was doing was standing tense. My biggest fear was it didn't know I wasn't actually them. And when it got to me, it might cry out in fear. And Big Daddy in the back might have taken it as I'm hurting that baby. And I didn't want that guy. I didn't want any part of that guy, man. He was massive, every bit of 800-900 pounds. At that point, I looked over at the Land Rover. I said, I'm good. Let's go." It was too much too soon for me.
Yeah.
And, it's a once in a lifetime moment. We backed out of there, back down the trail. And as we left, the big alpha male cocked his head back and gave a excellent owl call, which I can send you the audio. I wish I'd have sent that. I had my little RCA Small Wonder camera in my hands that I fidgeted with. That picture that you show of the guy that won along the trail, that was going in as I nervously held the camera and clicked that. That was part of the noise to the side of me. And that's kind of upward. It's not by telephoto. That guy peeking through the brush was that close. I don't know if you have the enhanced. Well, that's the enhanced picture. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The other one's darker and moonlight. Yeah, that's the enhanced version. That's how close this one was to me. And we backed out of there. But the big guy gave a perfect owl call, sounded very authentic, except for the fact it sounded like it was an 800-pound owl. And it's been kind of a reoccurrence with me. I was up in, let's see, not Kentucky. Yeah, it was Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky. I was out with a BFRO group. It was out on one of their expeditions. And I started hearing dialogue. I started getting that feeling. And I just told the group, I said, I want to go down here and check something out. I got away from the group. And I told him, I told the big guys, I said, look, I know you're here. I said, just give me a sign that you recognize who I am. And so I finished talking. I went back up by the group. Wayne, within about a minute or two, I heard that same owl call that the big guy gave down in Oklahoma, and
Wow.
That's happened a couple of times when I've been on these expeditions. And of course, there's people that quickly discount it and say, oh, that's just an owl, barred owl or whatever. But a lot of the people there will say, no, that don't sound like an owl. And they don't usually sit on the ground calling like that. They're up in the top of a tree, and the resonance is totally different. But yeah, I've got a couple owl calls recorded and documented in that fashion.
Okay. I wanted to ask you real quick.
Sure.
As far as the mind speak that you obviously experience with them, when you hear something like that in your head, is it a different voice, or is it your voice that you're just thinking something?
Wayne, it is very hard to describe. It's experience based. It's very, very clear in thought form. Man, I wish I could explain exactly, but I've had that dialogue with them, not often, but on several occasions. I don't know if I sent you the picture clip of the big guy up in a tree line over in eastern Texas, sitting on a branch there, 60 feet up in the air. I don't know if I sent you that one or not. I may not have. I could share it next time. I don't share this often, but I was with about 12 or 13 people. I got the feeling, that there was somebody around there watching me. And there's a lot of distractions when you're around newbies and people that don't believe or they do believe, or there's a lot of conflicting attitudes, going on. And there's some people out there that want to be entertained. They want to get out there and, well, when's the show going to start? And entertain me, dazzle me. That's not going to happen with them. They're not interested in being subjective to, somebody's little, desire to be entertained, but they are extremely curious to a fault almost. If you get out there and just hang out and do something, it doesn't matter what it is. They love music, they love hearing kids play. There's a lot that will attract them, but I just got away from the group where I could clear my mind. And I said this out loud, just like I did in Eastern Kentucky. I said, okay, big boy, I can feel you watching me. Where are you? And the words flashed through my mind. Here I am. And then I heard the real faint hoot. It was 526 yards up the ridge. I didn't just luckily, stumble onto that. And I looked up there and I saw the dark spot in the trees and got some better lenses and stuff and zoomed in and started videoing him. He was just sitting there watching, Now, another associate that I've done a lot of research with had 7x50 binoculars. When he finally zoomed in on that dark spot, he goes, "Oh, that's just a buzzard sitting up in the top of a tree." And I said, "It may be, but it's an 800-pound buzzard. I know what a buzzard looked like at 528 yards, and that wasn't even close to being that." I don't have a lot of solid answers there other than, it's an experience-based thing, but they will, if you've got a good, honest heart with no ulterior motives, and you respect them, you treat their areas with respect, it can go a long way. And sadly, I run into tons of people that think, they're just a dumb dog or dumb animal, and they're not gonna have much. They may get them irate, and get some brief, fleeting noises or something. But if you're out there with lights dangling off your head and and everywhere else, and everybody's got a camera, they're not interested. They'll clear out. Now they may play with you and run you on a little wild goose chase. One will hoot and they'll activity over there. You get close to one, then another one in another location will start and have you zigzagging and running back and forth. And in the end, you've just been running circles and they've played with you, So
Okay.
that's my opinion from experience,
Oh yeah.
They're real. They're very, they do some pretty incredible things. There's a lot you hear. Some researchers have a very narrow-minded attitude. They have got it preconceived in their mind. If it doesn't fit in these narrow parameters, I don't want to hear it. It doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. But I can tell you from experience, I have been surprised time and again with things that I have no logical answer for regarding these subjects. They do some pretty out of the box, incredible things, and go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating. I mean, you and I have been talking, a little bit over the last week, and you've told me quite a few stories, and you hadn't told me that one, so that one that one had me interested.
Well, thank you.
Tell me, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, I said
This next picture. I wanted to get to this one before we get off, and you and I have talked. We're gonna have you back. You've got way too many experiences, and you've agreed to be a friend of the show, so you're gonna come back, and we're looking forward to that. But I wanted you to talk, if you could, about this one because I thought that this was the most interesting one that you sent me. And if you look, you can see the eyes and the pair of nostrils looking through that brush right there. And I think that's a good picture.
I was in central Texas near Huntsville with two BFRO investigators and another associate, and we were down a trail, day walking trail near a large body of water, just seeing what was back in there. And at some point, I never saw the initial movement. One of the BFRO investigators keyed on something moving very quickly off to our left. He quickly described it. I've got a video of that that I don't know if it's small enough that I can send you. This is from a video I shot of the subject. And I immediately stopped, asked him where, got my video camera going. Sadly, I didn't have a monopole at that time. I was freehanding it. And the video is somewhat shaky. You know, when you go out on telephoto, it's really hard unless you're resting against a rock or anything. But I keyed on this subject hiding there, and this angle, he's about 75 yards away. I'm using very high telephoto on it. The video camera, the camera I have goes to 52x on. I got it for that reason, to zoom in. The leaves that you see there, the green leaves, are from a tree positioned about, I want to say 10, 15 yards in front of him. That dark area below the leaves is actually a tree stump, and he's standing behind it perfectly still. You can see his left shoulder through the gap of the leaves there to your right. You know, it's his left. And he's peering through the gaps in those leaves. But it's a good example, even at 75 yards, how well they use cover and concealment. Okay. He blends in, you know. I knew where to look and what to look for. He's looking off to my left, and I really think he was keying on a jogger that went by behind us along the trail. He was basically ignoring us. Well, I dropped down to one knee on this low water bridge we had just been crossing to steady the camera. When I got it back up and took the rest of it, he was gone. He saw his opportunity. He ducked and ran. And they do that. You know, they'll hold still. But I was very fortunate to get a decent video and show you as an example. At 75 yards, you're not going to see this, Wayne. You know, he could stand there and watch you all day. It was just that the guys I were with, or at least this one gentleman and his wife, he caught the brief movement, happened to be looking at the right place at the right time, or we would all passed him by. You know, so
what we got here?
This is a guy. This is in southern Missouri. This subject here, and at least 2 to 3 other ones were lobbing rocks at us across the creek. I was again with some BFRO researchers. This subject sitting on a ledge about 30 feet above rocks and the water line, pitch dark, moving around. And this is a clip from the thermal video I shot. He's sitting there with his legs spread, just chilling out, but chunking rocks at us, or at least close to us. We were never hit. I guess we were their Friday night entertainment or something, but I took over an hour's worth, got some great video and stuff. But yeah, was out there, and there was a bunch of them across there running. I mean, some of them were moving about and jumping in near pitch dark. Now, if he'd have fell off that little ledge he's sitting on, it's about a 30-foot fall into rocks. I can't see somebody doing that, putting on a suit and tightrope walking over there. The chances of that are nil, Wayne. It took us 4-wheel drive to get in there. Nobody knew we were going into that remote area. It was not pre-announced or pre-planned. And when we got there, I keyed on these subjects. You know, I don't know if anybody's going to prank around in an area that's real hard to get to, and the chances of anybody happening along in there are from slim to none. You know.
Yeah.
You know, it just that wasn't a prankster. That was one of the big guys, and I like the thermal. But yeah, this is the cover to my book. I've got that day watcher down in the left corner. On the right corner, this is a subject hiding in the stick pile. The little squares, the enlarged enhancement. The arrow goes back to the woods to show you where he exactly was. And that's the big guy up in the tree at about 528 yards, sitting on a little branch. That's my book. It has my early experiences, and I just wanted to share it with people that are interested, knowing, that these things are real and they live among us. And my opinion is they're a tribal people. They're a tribal people, not an animal.
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you there. Uh, Rick, I can't thank you enough, buddy, for coming
Well,
on.
my
And
pleasure.
like I said earlier, that you are now a friend of the show, and you have
Thank you.
agreed to come back and talk some more. And we got a lot more to get into. You've sent me quite a bit of
I've
stuff.
got a lot. I've got a lot more. I've
Well,
been
15 years worth.
yeah, I've been very fortunate. Very fortunate.
Ricky, you got anything, buddy?
No, I'm just sitting here listening to at Rick and his encounters. I've really enjoyed it. The mind speak you're talking of. I've never actually experienced that myself. I've been doing this for quite a number of years. However, we have had a couple of guys that's been out on encounters with us that have taken headaches, and I don't know whether it's
Yes.
I don't know whether it's a way they've got of actually showing that they don't want somebody there, or what it is. What's your feelings on that, Rick?
Well, I've never gotten a sickness. I've gotten buzzing in the ears. It actually felt like a little fly or something got up in my. It was that profound and annoying, but there was nothing in my ear that got my undivided attention. Now I wasn't squatching. I was down in Central Texas on a friend's land that had a severe hog problem, feral hog problem. And I asked him if he didn't mind me going down there and I've got a LR 308 mounted with a night vision scope. And I asked him if he didn't mind me going down there and taking out a few. He said, no, come on. So I went down there one day during the week, and squatching was not on my mind. I didn't think he had anything like that going on there. And I still don't know today for sure. But what happened to me, I have no logical explanation for. We had scouted out some good hog areas, for night hunting. We're on a side-by-side four-wheeler of his. Um, right before dark, where we headed back one last time to go back out after dark, he got picked something up, and the right front wheel of his side-by-side went flat. We limped into his barn there. Excuse me. He spent the better part of an hour looking for a patch kit and couldn't find one. And he eventually said, look, Rick, my health isn't going to allow me to pack back in there without transportation. He said, I don't have a spare. All the stores are it's a small town, but he said, all the places are closed where I can get this flat fixed. You're either going to have to come back another time or hunt alone. Hunting alone wasn't at the top of my list, but I had that LR 308 with 320 round clips. I had my Series 80 Colt cocked and locked in a holster on my hip. 45, my 45 with a couple extra clips. I was well prepared to rock and roll if I had to, but I went ahead and tentatively went out there by myself. And I got back to about halfway of the 160 acres that he has, following the clear cut areas. I didn't go into the brush or anything close to anything that could get right up on me without me knowing it was coming. And I don't know about you, but those big bore hogs can be pretty mean. They can kill you. I had a friend of my uncle up in Arkansas get killed by some of them. But anyway, at some point it was kind of quiet and I wasn't having a lot of luck, but I got to a certain area and there was a grove of trees about 100 yards away where I was hearing something. And so I started going kind of into a stock silent mode. where I was about knee to thigh high pasture and grass, and so I want to say I got within about 30 or 40 yards. I couldn't pick out anything. I was scanning with my thermal scope, and once I found something in there, I was going to identify it either with the thermal or my rifle night vision scope. You know, make sure I positively identified it was a hog before I even remotely thought about shooting. And I really couldn't get anything with the thermal or the rifle scope. The brush was too thick. But as I got to within about 30 or 40 feet, I was holding the the scope with my right hand. My left hand was free. My LR was hanging on a ready sling. You know, all I had to do is raise it, click it off safety, and I had 20 rounds of semi-auto. And there was no cattle fence, no charger. When I was going through my law enforcement training, I had to take a hit off of a taser so that I would know what it felt like. You know, we had to take one hit on the end of my left hand, on the fingertips. It felt like somebody hit me with a police taser. I could feel the jolt. I could feel the tingling up my nerve bundle of my arm, and my arm seized in an upward position. This all happened within a split second. I jumped back and swiveled, thinking a snake bit me or a spider bit me or whatever. And man, I put my bright cap light on, and man, I'm looking in front of me and making sure something, you know, it's not a snake or a spider or whatever. And for about a minute, I did a circular search. I wanted to know what just bit or hit my hand. And in that minute, my hand started to relax, the tingling left. And then after I couldn't find anything, I kind of put the scope up back towards the grove of trees. There was no movement, and all I said was, "Okay, big boy, I can take a hint." And my hunting that night was over. I mean, I didn't, no lasting impairment. Now I've told that story to a lot of people, but folks, I literally got zapped. You know, and if they can focus, whoever, whatever, can focus that kind of energy that precise, you know, I don't want to anger it or you know, there's a couple. I told another person the story, and they said, you may be thinking of it negative in the wrong way. What if they didn't want you to get in trouble with a big hog in there? You know, if I'd have shot one, could more have come out, and I couldn't have handled that many charging? They said that might have been a warning to get you out of there for your own good. Yeah. You know, it works both ways. What I do know is I wasn't seriously injured, and I was able to get out of there. And my hunting was over. I've never had anything like that happen before in my life, nor since. But that's one of the ones I chalk up to a shoulder shrug. I'm not sure one way or the other what, but it happened. You know.
Okay. Rick, tell us where we can get your book, buddy.
You can get on Amazon. I've got a link that I think, did I send you the link? I can send you the link.
Okay, yeah, send it to me.
My Facebook, I've got a Facebook page totally dedicated to Bigfoot. It's got a lot of my videos, pictures, the longer ones. It'll probably take you a while to get through it, but it's under Richard Stewart, Stewart, last name Taylor. It's Facebook. The links to my book are there for sure. They're on my wall. All you double click there, but it's under the title there. For some reason, people have trouble without the link getting to it. You know, there's a lot of Bigfoot books out there, but I believe they're a forest people. The Cherokees have many stories about these subjects. Some of them are very common. Some of them not so common. The native people have known for centuries that they consider them a tribe. They don't consider them an animal. And people that are researching have to take this into account. The people that have lived in America for thousands of years before the European settlers hit, they have a lot of stories and beliefs about these, and they're all very similar and quite the same. One story that an elder related to me, and it's on YouTube. I'm trying to think of the title of it, but the Cherokee lived in walled cities, kind of like forts. They had they had summer and they had winter lodging, which differed, and I won't take the time to go into all that, but they actually had a trading agreement with some of these subjects who actually kind of watched out for them in their settlement areas, just kind of uh, you know, an ally or a backup where these subjects here would warn the Cherokee of other tribes invading or whatever else. They had a pretty good relationship. And some people have said that if Native American bloodline may be a connection. I don't know, but from my experience, it seems like there's something about me that they don't feel threatened, or do they dislike. I've had good luck out there. Never been threatened. Never had a bad experience. I can't say anything bad about it.
All right, well, good deal. Okay, so guys, like I said, Amazon, you can get his book. Rick, again, appreciate it, buddy, and we're gonna have you back pretty soon if you'll come back. And I appreciate you taking the time and
yeah,
talking to us tonight.
absolutely.
Rick,
Okay.
All right.
really
My
enjoyed it.
pleasure.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you.
Well, we
Y'all
are
have a safe-
getting off here, and we will talk again. See y'all next time.